Most people they aren't like ready to buy, and I don't mean that like in a way to like discourage anyone, but a lot of times most people aren't. Obviously, no one's gonna say, "Hey, I don't want to make any money," or
Yeah, I do all those things. I ask those questions. I engage with them like that. But they're still like, hey, send me something.
maybe for whatever reason, if the market does come back down, maybe World War III, maybe the election, whatever the hell happens, at least a portion of your money is protected.
I'm not right now. Maybe call me back next month.
Most of the people that we're speaking to are actually older than us. Once they feel like you're trying to outsmart them rather than actually help them, I think that like becomes a turnoff.
So today I kind of wanted to touch base on some feedback I'm getting based on conversations that I've had with you guys, which is, a lot of the agents have said, their leads are hitting them back up and they're talking about, well, just send me something, or they're not ready to make any moves yet, that commitment. And I don't know if it's necessarily how they're approaching it, or not approaching it, different things that they are doing. But I do know that, there's a good majority of you who are pretty consistent in closing deals and getting people to make those commitments and to understand that, it's time to shift. We're not in the growth phase anymore. We're walking into retirement right now. I think it's been said a million times that establishing that rapport out the door is really, really important, to get them to kind of lean into you and trust you, and your expertise and what you're trying to help them accomplish. And how important the psychology of this whole thing is, and really understanding people and how you speak to them, how you speak with them. So I wanted to hit it from the angle today of that topic of getting those people out of that growth mindset and into the retirement mindset. What are some things that you keep in mind whenever you're engaging with leads that you ensure they kind of lean into your expertise?
Most people they aren't like ready to buy, and I don't mean that like in a way to like discourage anyone, but a lot of times most people aren't. Obviously, no one's gonna say, "Hey, I don't want to make any money," or "Hey, I want to lose money." Everyone wants to like three things, right? They want to grow their money as much as possible, they want safety, and they want income. That's what you have to figure out what moves someone, right? For example, I'll pick on Barry. In my mind, like maybe Barry doesn't want to protect his money. Maybe Barry wants to go out and travel, and that's his motive. That's what's going to get him to move, right? I'm like, okay, so as I'm speaking to people, kind of got to figure out like what's their motive, like what's really going to drive them. When you ask those questions, it's really to bring out the emotion and then to use that emotion to use it to drive them. If you're going to keep on harping on income and not what that's going to do, then it doesn't really mean anything, because they're like, okay, great. I spoke with Jeremy and he told me he can increase my income. Okay, that's great. But now let's see if they speak to Barry, and Barry's like, look, with whatever plan it is that we have, now you don't have to worry about, your kids working or your wife working. How will that change your life? How will that impact you? Rather than me just going out there and say, hey, I can increase your income, that person is going to be more gravitated to Barry just because he's bringing out that emotion, where I'm just giving them with just hard, solid numbers. And at the end of the day, it really doesn't mean much.
And they say, yeah, I do all those things. I ask those questions. I engage with them like that. But they're still like, hey, send me something, or I'm not right now. Maybe call me back next month. Like there's no actual commitment to that. How do you kind of reel it back in? How do you get their attention, get them leaning back into you, even after you've already touched on those personal points of theirs?
What most people think is just because you ask the question that you ask the question, if that makes sense. Like just because you ask it doesn't mean that you really ask the question. Right now, if I'm speaking to Barry and I'm like, all right, so great. If you were to pass away, like, are your kids, okay? Or is your family okay? Versus me saying like, Barry, if you were to pass away, would your kids be okay? It's a huge difference. We're pretty much like in that defense mode, waiting for the objection, that you have what to say in your head. What I've learned throughout time is that the more calm that I'll stay throughout the phone call and just being relaxed and super calm, the less objections I'll get and the more I'll get that person to open up. So two people could ask the same exact question, but if someone asks with a different tone, it'll have more of an effect on the prospect than just rushing through the question.
To me, it sounds like you're putting more emotion into it, like making them really have to think about it by slowing it down and being like, would they really be okay? I know one of the things that some of the other agents have discussed with me is like, people are like, well, I've got about a percent growth, over the last 6 months or something like that, with their portfolios and stuff, and they're not wanting to make moves. And he's been using like the 2020 hit, with COVID and everything like that as an example. Well, you took a pretty solid hit. Could you handle another one of those? How many years would it take you to get back there? Do you have that kind of time? And that could be another kind of, do you think you could handle another, hit in the market? Do you think all that you just gained back, you've got time to, regrow?
Right now that the market has been doing well, a lot of people are saying, hey, I think I'm just going to leave it the way it is. I'm making money. It doesn't make any sense for me to make any changes right now. I'll agree with them. I say, look, I totally get it. Look, I don't know when the market is going to go up, when it's going to go down. And then they'll say, yeah, I think I'm just going to leave it the way it is, or so on and so forth. And I'll say, well, look, not to change what it is that you're doing, but rather than changing your portfolio, what about if we add to it? What about if you add some type of protection this way? Hey, look, if you believe the market is going to go up, great. It'll still go up with the market. You're not going to get rich from it, but now I'm setting that expectation like, okay, that he's going to get some growth. Maybe for whatever reason, if the market does come back down, maybe World War III, maybe the election, whatever the hell happens, at least a portion of your money is protected.
I think it's really, really important for, agents and advisors as a whole to understand the psychology of this, because the ones that are doing well are the ones that do get it. Like behind the scenes, they know they're controlling this conversation, making sure they're finding out the proper information from this person and what their needs are, what their wants are, while letting them feel like they're in control.
Most of the people that we're speaking to are actually older than us, and they've been on the block. Once they feel like you're trying to outsmart them rather than actually help them, I think that becomes a turnoff. I had a meeting on Monday. A guy came in and he told me, Jeremy, I'm going to bring in my family because I want you to pitch them as well and bring whatever paperwork it is that you have, everything, right? So when they all sat down in the conference room, I was like, listen, forget about the paperwork. I'm going to explain the concept to you and your family again, the same way how I did when it was just us. And then at that point, if your family likes me, great, we could talk about paperwork. I'll show you whatever it is you want to see. And if not, totally fine. If you need anything, I'm here and we can still be friends. And the meeting went a lot more smoother. I just think, just don't overthink it. Just be yourself and just try to, I think, understand the person.
Like a lot of guys, they'll ask for scripts and stuff, and that's fine. Like it gives you a starting point on the verbiage and the wording that's used, but it's also really important to, be yourself and really use your own skills and tactics and control of the conversation. Getting them talking, getting them opening up while you're controlling kind of the narrative of where the conversation's going to go, and having them lean into you as a trusted source that they can confide in what their challenges are, what their goals are, and that, you're genuinely there to help them. That's one of the other things I wanted to kind of chat about. One of the guys that we had, he kind of shifted his whole approach to these leads. At first, it was showing up to the cause, pitching them, this is what I do, this is what I'm about, these are the things we can do for you, blah, 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 without actually finding anything out about them yet. And so he shifted that. He shifted that to listening versus, speaking. And all of his speaking was about inquiry. It was inquiry, asking the right questions, utilizing the right tone and making sure they're invested in what this person has going on and what they're trying to accomplish. Have you had any moments like that where it's like I should steer clear of this kind of approach and make some shifts into here and make sure I'm addressing these types of things?
Yeah, what I've noticed most of the time is that if you're speaking most of the time throughout the presentation, there's a good chance that you're not going to get them. I feel like if it's like 80-20, 80% of you speaking, 10% of them, and 10% of you presenting. Most of the time, it's going to end up with, let me think about it, let me get back to you, and all that other stuff. Everyone likes to speak about themselves. It'll help you close them because you can just use whatever it is that they're saying, their own words, to make them feel comfortable. So it's not too much like selling where you're overcoming the objections. It's more of like, okay, this is what they're saying. Let me figure out, let me listen to them. And then at that point, you can use whatever it is that they're saying to overcome it. But if you're just speaking, people zone out. I mean, there's times in the middle of the meeting while the person is speaking that I'll zone out. If you can at least get them to where they're speaking 50 to 70% of the time, at least 50%, I think your chances of getting them will be a lot higher.
I know you probably already even mentioned a few, but what are some of your couple of questions that are always your go-to to get them to start opening up? Like, is it really just as basic as what brought you to the survey? What does that look like?
A big one for me is, why now? What are you hoping to find? If you don't find it, then what? And then at that point, you kind of gauge and see like, okay, if someone tells you like, listen, if I can't find it, I'm probably going to pull all of my my money out to make sure it's secure. Now you know it's a safety issue. I feel like once you get them to answer one of those questions, they usually just keep on speaking and they'll open up to you, and then you can kind of just gauge from there.
That's what I'm getting. Some of the feedback that I'm getting is that, some of them it's either it's either completely on or completely off. Either their conversations are really great because the people are coming out the gate ready to talk and ready to chat with the agents, or it's like they're just pulling and pulling and pulling, trying to get them to, be present into the situation and not just feel like they're being sold, and getting them to actually open up and speak to them and tell them what's going on, what they're trying to accomplish and stuff like that. You do both. You go to in person and you do virtual. This last year's where you really picked into the Zoom. You were even closing some deals over the phone. This is an age-old question as well, as like doing this whole virtual thing and running into people who are like, well, I'd rather have somebody I want to meet in person. Anything that you have learned as you have, grown in this environment, with doing virtual leads, but also still going to visit people, that you've learned to help with the virtual side of things when it comes to that question or inquiry or problem or objection?
I think with the virtual side, that's something that's like ongoing and learning, like I mentioned before, like the whole thing, like with the background and all that, and some, the way I dress, so on and so forth. Some of these people, they really don't know. They're not too familiar with technology, at least my people. I mean, unless everyone here gets people that are tech savvy, but for some reason, the leads that I've always gotten, it's like, not that they're bad, but they're also not the best when it comes to like tech stuff. What I'll do is I'll always throw out the option, like, do it old school, put the pen and paper, or do a Zoom. And I think in the fact that these people are coming, just try to understand that they're clicking on other ads. They're doing other Zooms. So try to be more understanding and put yourself in their shoes and figure out, okay, how can I make the process easier for them so they can get along with me better or be more comfortable with me?